So welcome, Christina. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you. I'm delighted.
So let's start out by talking a little bit about your journey. You arrived at the Allegheny County Airport Authority in 2015. U.S. Air had shut down its hub in Pittsburgh 10 years earlier. After it completed its merger with American Airlines, it further shrunk its footprint in the city. What did you find when you arrived in Pittsburgh 5 years ago?
First of all, thank you all for being here, and thank you for this opportunity. Just to remind everybody, because maybe not anybody been to Pittsburgh in the past 5 years? Okay, not a lot. So thank you for those of you who've come. Pittsburgh starts off, right, as this steel production town. And in the 80s, the steel industry collapses. And the entire community comes together and says, we can't have this happen again. How do we diversify the economy? Fantastic. They figure it out. They focus on the universities, and they really look at energy, healthcare, tech, and financial services and education. Okay. Then, in 2004, U.S. Airways, which had asked the county to spend $1 billion building infrastructure to support their global mega hub, they left. And it's the second gut punch to the entire community. 10,000 jobs leave, businesses relocate because executives can't get where they need to go nonstop. And by the time I got there in 2015, in January of 2015, quite reluctantly, by the way, because I'm from Boston and I hadn't really been to Pittsburgh, and I thought, why would I go? But I started to, when I started to engage with the recruiter, understand what the community had done to reinvent itself, and I thought, well, why hasn't the airport done the same? So what I found was a whole lot of frustration with the business community, like why can't we get a hub airline back? What's happened to us? Why us? A lot of frustration, a lot of confusion, a lot of misunderstanding about what the airline industry is about and how its business models has changed, and a completely defeated team. Just a group of people that I was brought in to lead that thought, yeah, what are you going to do? So I would say it was for me, it was a great opportunity, and I could see where this could go, but I did not have a whole lot of people who believed that things would be dramatically different when I got there.
So who were among the first constituencies you went out and met with?
Staff. It started with staff. I had two parallel tracks that I was working on. I understand that a lot of this focus today and tomorrow is on partnership, and I understood quickly I could come in and have all of the facts and all of the data, but frankly, if people didn't believe me, it wasn't gonna work if I couldn't get them to help. So I had an external track and an internal track, and worked really quickly to set up myself as an inside outsider. I come from inside the industry, but outside the community, and therefore people were willing to listen. I'm a woman, I'm from Boston, I've never run an airport before. What the hell are you gonna do here? That's really the question that they were asking. So I met with the business community, with the folks who run the Convention and Visitors Bureau, with the tech community, with the university presidents. At the same time, I was meeting with staff groups and with employees, and I was just sort of understanding, where do people think we are? And at the same time, I'm saying, look, we're setting the big vision. This is what we can be. How do we redefine success? Forget hubs. They're gone in the Midwest. We were just the first to fall. So let's focus on being a great airport to serve this community, like Boston does, like San Diego does, like Tampa does, where you don't have passengers connecting. There's a new success model that's possible. And so I focused on selling that vision into staff and into key opinion leaders in the community, including the press. I was very, very clear about where we were going.
So talk a little bit about what it means to shift the mindset away from we need to be a hub, we need to be a hub, we need to be a hub, to we're a destination, because it seems as though telling that story is something that you need a lot of people to buy into, not just the airport authority.
Yeah, right. So I had to start with the board. When I was interviewing, I said, look, if you need somebody to come in and bring back the hub, go find somebody else, because it's never going to happen. The industry has changed. The large airlines, which, you know, for those of you who don't spend your lives in the industry, in the U.S., Southwest, American, Delta, and United have 85% of the market. So they've got their hubs, and they're not changing them. And you're not going to get somebody else to locate here. It has nothing to do with the airport. Nothing to do. It's all about the market and the market size. So let's start educating people, and let's talk about the fact that the opposite of a hub is not a hub. It's an origin and destination market. Not so much that we're a destination, but we have this huge, robust community that wants to fly, and people want to fly in to go to school, to do business here. Let's take care of those people. And once I could start to position that there was an alternative, people thought, okay, well, that's great. As long as I can get to Miami or London or San Francisco, I'm happy. That's going to make my business grow. One of the first groups I talked to, I had been there about 6 weeks, I spoke to the Tech Council, and an entrepreneur came running out after me as I was waiting for my car, and he said, let me tell you what this means to me. This is my second startup. I'm a Carnegie Mellon graduate. The first one I sold. The second one, I'm looking for investment. Guys came in from San Francisco, had to connect. Weather meant they couldn't get out of Chicago. So they spent the night in Chicago. They came to Pittsburgh. They love the company. They're going to invest. And they said, we will never have a board meeting here. That's the impact. So I was able to start to tie the impact of the airport to the economy's ability to do what it needs to do, for the fact that people who had watched an entire generation leave after the collapse of steel in the 80s, that's why there's Steeler bars in every city in the US and some internationally, is because a whole generation had to leave to find work. So there were enough people who remember that, and to be able to say, listen, if you want to be able to watch your grandkids' soccer game, we have to have this economy work. And the airport's the last piece, and we have got to fix this. So tying what we were doing and why a new flight to San Francisco mattered and why people should pay attention to that, and what was in it for them, that was most of my work in the first year.
Are we now at a point in your transformation where the airport is not the last piece, but the centerpiece? Talk a little bit about the airport in Pittsburgh, but in other communities, as a centerpiece of economic development. How do you leverage having a great airport to create an economic environment, an economic development story for the region?
Yeah, so there's no question that if you don't have access to good global infrastructure that ties you into the global transportation network, you're going to lose as a community. And if you're not near it, then you've got to figure out how you're going to tie into it. So Pittsburgh is relatively far from any other major hub. It's a 6-hour drive to Philly. It's 4 hours to Washington, D.C. So, and you know, Cleveland and Akron and Youngstown are nearby, but they're not big hubs in themselves. So Pittsburgh has to work for Pittsburgh. And it's so much more than being an airport. We really do believe that it's the economic engine that the universities need to bring students in from around the world, researchers need to bring research partners in from around the world, and the business needs in order to grow and do what it needs to do. So we are definitely, in Pittsburgh, part of the story of economic renaissance, and I would say that we're now focused on how our new building project can take that story even further and look at, okay, what's the learning legacy that comes out of this facility, and how do we make that tie to education and workforce by using this project that is once in a 30-year kind of opportunity. So almost everything we do, we look at as reflecting and serving the community, everything. And that has to do with what, not only moving people and goods, but how effectively we do it, and how we're able to use that as a showpiece for what the region can do. So you've all heard of Carnegie Mellon University, I'm assuming. That's in Pittsburgh. And that is an amazing draw in terms of notoriety. And we're looking to be that, get back to that place in the aviation industry, which, by the way, Pittsburgh used to be in. So just to have the goal of getting back into a leadership position in the industry, we see that as a way of attracting or highlighting the benefits of the region and all that it offers.
We've been talking all morning about partnerships and the importance of creating good, sustainable partnerships. Share a case study from your experiences in Pittsburgh about a partnership that worked and why.
So the Convention and Visitors Bureau is charged with putting conventions into the convention center and heads and beds, right? Filling hotel rooms. My job is butts and seats. Their job is heads and beds. There's a correlation there. There's a match. But the head of the Convention and Visitors Authority said to me, "Look, you've got to lead this. You go figure out where we can increase our service footprint, and I'll show up with resources that allow for offering people a reason to come in." So lots of people want to go out of Pittsburgh and go on vacation or do business, but how do we get people to come in? And Pittsburgh may not be the first place you think of having a city break. So raising that profile, particularly internationally, is a big deal.
Got the Andy Warhol Museum. Come
Right,
on.
that's a huge, and that was a huge issue. Actually, that was one of the reasons WOW Airlines, which is now gone, but their founder was a huge Warhol fan, right, and loved Frank Lloyd Wright's Falling Water, which is an hour outside of Pittsburgh. So anything we can use, we will use to highlight the assets of the community. We were going after British Airways. British Airways had served Pittsburgh for 15 years when it pulled out in 1999. In 1999, BA said, "We're done. We're giving up on this market." So when I got there, the first thing, you could see it from space, was we need to get service back to London. And it took 4 years to do it. As part of that, we had to raise the profile of Pittsburgh in the UK market. And the way that US airports are governed, just in case anybody doesn't know this, we are not allowed by federal statute to spend money outside of the air, unless it's on our facility. So any revenue that we generate at the facility, we have to spend on the facility. New York accepted, right? So that's why your airports look like this, because they're grandfathered in to anyway. So, but the rest of us have to live by that rule. So we have. I just lost my train of thought because I got caught about New York. Where was I going?
Bring British Airways.
Yeah, British Airways back. So we had to raise the profile of, so we had to partner with somebody who could host events at the U.S. Embassy, who could spend money on advertising, who could invest in a PR firm, and to really look for opportunities to highlight why Pittsburgh is not the crappy old steel town that people thought that it still was. The memo about Pittsburgh hasn't necessarily landed everywhere. So much of what we do when we are talking to airlines has nothing to do with the airport. They assume your runways will allow the plane to land. They assume the gate will pull up to the plane. They care about the market. So much of what we've been doing is selling that market, and that partnership has required, the partnership with the Convention and Visitors Bureau has been key to the success that we've had for a lot of new routes.
So there are a lot of people in the room who probably do not sit in your seat, but partner with organizations like yours, authorities. What advice would you give people about how to be a good partner?
Well, show up and ask. So, the first thing that we actually, one of the things that we're really lucky, and I was listening to the last panel talk really quickly at the end about foundations. So Pittsburgh is a foundation community. Carnegie, Frick, Heinz, Mellon, Westinghouse, these guys made a lot of money. A lot of them made their money before there was an income tax. So they set up these foundations, and the foundations spend a percentage of their money improving the quality of life in Western Pennsylvania, which is why Pittsburgh has a ballet and a symphony and an opera, right? That is really world class. So we have been tapping into those partnerships and looking for ways to have them get involved in this new building that we are going to be unveiling in 4 years. But that started because the R.K. Mellon Foundation actually called and said, so I like what you're talking about with sense of place. my feeling was, if you land here, you should feel like you're in Pittsburgh. How do we do that? And he called and said, I'd like to fund it. I said, what does that mean? He said, well, we fund a lot of cultural institutions downtown, the museums, the Children's Museum, et cetera. Why don't I bring their executives out and let's figure out how we can represent those institutions at the airport in order to drive visitation downtown. So we now have this robust partnership with the Richard King Mellon Foundation, and because of that, are now expanding into looking at how we can look at the airport when it comes to some of the issues that our community is facing around workforce and education, in order to highlight opportunities and get more people involved in the not only the aviation industry, but in sustainable careers.
We will go to questions from the audience in just a minute, so if you have a question for Christina, make sure to flag down one of our mic runners. So you said that one of the keys to being a good partner is to show up and to ask. What kind of leadership do you look for from your partners? The thing about a partnership that's so interesting is that everyone is sort of equals in the room because by definition it's a partnership, but you also need people to show leadership. Can you talk a little bit about what, again, that looks like in a successful partnership?
Well, I think what it looks like is a real understanding of what is possible and what is likely. So it's like, understanding your own strengths and weaknesses and really not committing to more than you can deliver. So in the case of any of our partners, I feel like wherever we have to meet them, I'm willing to meet them because a little bit is better than nothing. And I would say that what makes them effective and what I look for in their leadership is that it's what you look for in any staff member or colleague is, are they trustworthy? Do I believe that they're going to deliver? And do they have a realistic expectation of what this partnership can do? Can we get there together? Can we define together what the outcome of this partnership will look like, as opposed to, I want to help. Okay, well, it's not my job to figure that out alone, so can we do that together? I think that's always what I'm looking for. In terms of leadership, I tend to look for collaborative and transparent and leadership that understands accountability. Like, we're going to have to set deadlines. We're going to have to work towards something concrete.
You mentioned transparency. How does that manifest itself in a partnership? Is it transparency around metrics, which a lot of the previous panel talked about? Is it transparency around intention? Unpack that a little bit for us. I think
that's a great way of characterizing it. It needs to be unpacked, right? Because it's a great word, but for us, what it means is, what are you up against, right? Why are you here? What's in it for you? And I think we can all be incredibly altruistic, but at the end of the day, there's something in it for the person personally that's making this appeal or making this pitch, and there's also something in it for the organization. So let me understand that, and I'll tell you exactly what we're trying to do. So there's a transparency of intent and a transparency of what I would consider to be the background forces, right? Where can we get tripped up? What might happen? Are there internal politics that you're up against? Is this a slam dunk, or do we have to sell it? What are the obstacles to the path to success? And so for me, transparency is, do we really understand what this process is going to look like? Or if we don't, can we work towards that together in a way that we both win? And it's 1 and 1 is 3. So the transparency for us is really around, in the leadership, is this a person that is going to show up and actually get stuff done if we show up and get our stuff done? Because we've worked with some of them that don't.
Questions from the audience? There's one in the back, yeah.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm sorry, I haven't spoken much today, so the pipes are still clogged. Yeah, it's great to be here. Just wonderful to see. This is my first time here. Wonderful to see all you wonderful people in the room who working to make the world a better place in a strategic way. So kudos to all of you. That's really great. My name is Richard Oyefeso, and our tiny organization is called For Bread for Life. And I'm a Nigerian-born, US-trained pediatrician working in Canada, but trying to give back to Nigeria, if that makes sense. So Nigeria has the second highest infant and mortality rate in the world. So what we do is try and train healthcare providers and just look at ways to improve that mortality. And that's part of the reason why we're here. You've mentioned partnerships several times. And my question is, one of the things that we've noticed in our journey is that because we're small, we're often ignored. And what are the suggestions for a small organization to get in bed with bigger ones? And one of the things that we've also noticed is that you mentioned politics as well. So for example, in Nigeria, we also mentioned transparency. So the converse of that is opacity. So there's a lot of opacity in Nigeria, for example, intentionally. And also there's a lack of accountability and also a lack of political will. So that many big organizations are actually tripped up by that consistently. And that there's a place for, so smaller organizations like ours, we're here, we understand accountability, we understand transparency. Engage us a little bit more in order to achieve your results. So can you speak to how small organizations can navigate that reality? Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate the question because it's all relative. In the aviation sector, nobody cares about airports, okay? All the sexiness is with the airlines, the manufacturers, and the distributors. The airports are just assumed to be, it's gonna work, it's a bus station, you pull up the plane, hey, whatever. So I can tell you that, and we were an airport that had lost almost all of our service. We almost had no platform to speak from when I got there. And the big vision for me that I put forward was we will be a global aviation leader. We will be a global aviation leader. We will inspire the industry and we will reflect the community. That was incredibly audacious 4.5 years ago. We achieved it 3 years ago and had to set a new vision. So what I would say from my perspective is, it's not like there are a whole lot of airline CEOs who are dying to talk to the CEO of the Pittsburgh International Airport, especially when I started. But we found a way to become relevant by understanding their business model, and I don't pretend to say that this will be a perfect translation for you, but we found a way to meet them where they were and to find our way in. And we also partnered with a whole bunch of other small organizations, right, locally, to become a bigger force ourselves, so that we sort of demanded attention just through the fact that we were more than just the airport. We were coming as a community.
Before I let you go, any last-minute plugs for visits to Pittsburgh?
It's better than you would have possibly think. It's a great place.
I don't know. I think you're underselling it a little bit.
No, I mean, like I said, I moved when they called and said, "What do you do?" The headhunter said, "There's an airport that is looking for a CEO. What do you think?" I said, "Great. Where is it?" They said, "Pittsburgh." I said, "I'm not going to Pittsburgh." So I have just completely fallen in love with the community, and I find it very easy to talk to airlines about all of the reasons that they should serve it because it's such a great place to be. So thanks.
Well, thank you, Christina.